Good morning, and I did want to correct that I have recently not been on the board of the National Council, but I was for many years, so I just wanted to correct that. I want to thank Deb and Marianne for being such great hostesses, and Tina from CASA, who picked me up from the airport a couple of nights ago and was a great person to get to know and drive across Nebraska and see all the cornfields. And I also want to thank Judge Johnson, who's not here, but who had the idea of having me come and speak with you. He and I are great friends from the National Council work that we've done for the last really couple of decades. So I am going to have to use my notes because I'm supposed to be presenting for about an hour, and I probably won't go the full hour, but who knows. So I do have to use my notes. And I am using a clicker for the PowerPoint, and I'm not the most technologically astute person, so I may stumble a little bit. Please bear with me. I also wanted to say to those of you who just went to the Compassion Fatigue conference or workshop that I take really good care of myself. I do yoga. I'm a yoga person. My husband and I do 90 minutes of yoga in the morning before work at a club. And I'm also a huge believer in food as medicine, and I try to only eat things that don't make me age, like blueberries and spinach. So I am the picture of the California girl, I have to admit. My yoga, my vegetarianism, I drive a Prius, okay? So try not to hate me too much. In any event, I chose this topic as the name of my presentation because it has occurred to me that historically, the collective positive impact that society has experienced with regard to the social justice reform and the honoring of human dignity of all people has been with this main ingredient, compassion, and the honoring of self-determination and the protection of one's constitutional rights. Major changes like integrated schools, women's equality, healthcare access, housing reform, voter rights, marriage equality, all of these social reforms sought to make sure that individuals, no matter what their background, religion, social standing, or political party, could enjoy the same rights as everyone else in America, which leads us all to believe in the American dream. Many argue that the only thing that can transform a system is that true concern for other human beings. And for a government system that work with families and children, that has the power to forever take a child from a parent, a brother from a sister, grandparents, uncles, aunts, tribes, communities, that has the power to lock up a 14-year-old who has to do certain things to get out of incarceration and then off probation, and then impose fines and fees onto the parents of that child and overwhelm the family, which causes the entire family to slip even further and further from their ability to realize the American dream. That caring looks like becoming trauma-informed, culturally responsive, and gender-specific in our approach. Webster's defines compassion this way. Compassion is the ability to be sympathetic, tender, and responsive. An old idea, yes, but a new lens for some. I personally had to have permission to have compassion in my work. I was a prosecutor and then a judge, and I never learned about really what works in law school or being trained as a prosecutor. In preparation for the discussion today, I distributed a document called Social Work for Social Justice, the 10 Principles from the University of St. Thomas School of Social Work, published in 2008. The article was given to you, and I hope you might have had a brief time to at least look at it. The 10 principles involve human dignity, the dignity of work, the rights of others, the rights of workers, community and the common good, solidarity, rights and responsibilities, stewardship, priority for the poor and the vulnerable, governance, and the principle of subsidiarity, participation, and lastly, the promotion of peace. I located this document when I was researching and writing my remarks. These principles resonated with me almost entirely, so I thought I should share them with you, especially because they do convey the message that I wish to share, and it dovetails nicely with my theme. Compassion is the greatest healer that society can offer for the perpetrator, the victim, the parent who has lost their child, and the child who grows up just lost. Simultaneously, and perhaps even perplexing, I have also found that when I am willing to allow myself to find that goodness in myself, no matter what my role, and share it with everyone that I come into contact with, at the end of the day, I am not as drained of vitality and energy. I actually feel better. So this approach is actually a win-win. Even physiologically, it has been confirmed that it takes more energy to frown than to smile. Now I will discuss how a few of these principles weave into the work that I do and could be woven into the work that you do. I find that just reading these principles in and of themselves uplifts me and gives me a great relief. I read it and I know that it is the right guidance for my work. The first principle is human dignity. Dignity of the human person is the ethical foundation of a moral society. The measure of every institution is whether it threatens or enhances the life and dignity of the human person. Now I read this and I think, as a professional, day in and day out, working with too many cases and not enough money or resources, it is easy to leave compassion out of the equation. And it is daunting. It's a daunting job for me to see 15 to 20 cases per day of folks living on the margin of society, doing the best that they can, but not doing enough to keep their kids in the home, stay out of jail, stay sober, keep a roof over their heads, stay sane, stay crime-free, follow all 10 of my court orders, and keep the social worker and/or the probation officer happy. The level of human suffering that I witness can overwhelm me, and I forget that what I have before me is a human being with a story, with a precious love of their own that is precarious due to the many levels of desperation that many must traverse to emerge even for just one day whole. How do I continue to honor them and be present in the moment and really listen? In his book, Tattoos on the Heart, Reverend Gregory Boyle writes about the power of boundless compassion to turn Los Angeles gang members into productive citizens by bringing them into the fold of society. He says that nothing stops a bullet like a job. He speaks of kinship as a primary lifesaver, providing a person with connection, recognition, and yes, hope. He says that our children suffer from a lethal absence of hope. I hang on to that, and sometimes I think that I have nothing more to offer. In child abuse and neglect court one day, I heard a lawyer for the county tell a 13-year-old not to get their hopes up about being returned to their mother. I took issue with that because hope is good. It is the great healer of broken hearts. And I told that child that they should get their hopes up because magical things can happen when we have a vision for a better day. I'm not sure if that 13-year-old was able to go home, but I do know that I am in the untenable position of taking things from people, their parents, their freedom, their money, their children. I will not belong to a system that purposely takes anyone's hopes. It is too painful to do that. Instead, I do the opposite. I actually call myself a hope peddler when all else fails, and that's all I have. This is a picture of my mom. She was one of 8 children born to a Native American father and a mixed-race mother who had been 6th generation Californio. That's what we call the original Californians. I'm 8th generation. They moved from city to city picking crops and orchards while my mother was growing up. This is my dad, one of 10 children, born to 2 Mexican-born parents from Durango, Mexico. They came to the U.S. in 1923. My grandfather, Aurelio Lucero, was a labor broker. He hired out all of his children to work in the fields and orchards of Northern California. My parents met in high school. I grew up as part of a large Mexican-American family in California. At times, we lived in Section 8 housing and relied on food stamps. My siblings and I weathered alcoholism, domestic violence, my father's frequent short-term incarcerations, my mother's absence due to working more than one job at times, and what might have been described as early parentification, as I took charge of my sisters and my brother from an early age. Our family looked very much like the families I see in court every day. My mother was a high school dropout who had me at her second child at the age of 18. That's actually my brother in her arms. She pushed education as a way out and saw to it that each of her children, all 4 of us, graduated from college. When in college, she did not have money to send, but she sent her strength through the mail and on the phone. I never felt like I was struggling, but I could see that those around me were, especially my mother. From a very young age, I wanted to make the lives of others easier, so I ended up in law school. I already knew early on that to make a difference, I had to have an education. As I said earlier, my first job out of law school was as a deputy district attorney prosecuting crimes against children. I also represented children in dependency court, which is our child welfare court, as a lawyer. And later, I became a judge, preferring to specialize in the juvenile justice arena. We call juvenile delinquency court juvenile justice court, and we call our child welfare court dependency court. I have sat in many of the courts, adult criminal, family court, as well as the juvenile justice and the dependency courts. We see day in and day out that our courts are filled with people of color and poor people. As I said, I see my family, my mother, my father, my siblings, the addiction, the poverty, the family violence that marked my own childhood. And I'm so grateful that we did not end up in the system, as well we could have. I am so grateful that I was not separated for a lifetime from my little sisters and my brother. Honestly, I do not think I could have survived it. My goal each day is to make sure I treat all I come into contact with dignity and respect, no matter why they are here. The families I see, no doubt, do need intervention, but I need to ask myself if I'm using a sledgehammer to place a nail when a smaller tool would suffice, or even worse, if that sledgehammer is only brought out for certain families. The third principle is community and the common good. All individuals, by virtue of their human nature, should have social needs, human relationships, and enable people to meet their needs and provide an important vehicle for change. The family is the central social institution that must be supported and strengthened. The way in which a society is organized directly affects human dignity and the common good. Father Gregory Boyle, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the book Tattoos on the Heart, says that we need to have a new lens. And here is what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment of how they carry it. Keeping families together and/or connected should be our primary goal, barring extraordinary circumstances. In an article called Through a New Lens Toward a Fundamental Reframing, the National Human Services Assembly held out a bold idea to address the Great Recession of 2009 by looking towards co-location of services and integration of governmental approaches with an eye towards ending intergenerational poverty. The big idea was simple. The client is not the child. The client is not the adult. The client is the family. And he said, quote, that if we truly believe that we what we say about making a difference in the lives of vulnerable children and adults, then we need to acknowledge a fundamental flaw in how we tend to frame or think or speak about our work. The client is not the adult. The client is not the child. The client is the family. A fundamental reframe. There are so many unintended consequences when we separate a child from their family or tribe or community, and we do not truly understand the deep wounds that can be caused by such a state act. And it is, if we're honest with ourselves, the most invasive state act. I have parents that much rather be incarcerated than have their child taken or parental rights terminated. Kevin Campbell, who is one of the founders of Family Find, says that the absence of an unconditionally committed parent in the life of a child cannot be treated by medication or therapy. According to Open Door Mission, a website that I pulled up last night, Nebraska has 20,000 homeless people. 2,000 of them are in Omaha. Pat O'Brien, the CEO of You Gotta Believe, which specializes in adoption for teenagers out of foster care, says that as a society, we virtually create the next generation of the homeless and disenfranchised. 60% of homeless living in New York City municipal shelters kids grew up in foster care. 50% of the youth served in this study were runaway and homeless youth programs reported growing up in foster care. 70% of the youth residing in New York City's Covenant House reported they had been in foster care. 27% with a foster parent, 43% with a group home. Nationwide, homeless statistics are equally as devastating, with 46% or almost half of the youth in shelters saying that they had been in the foster care system. 56% of all young adults accessing federally funded youth shelters in 1997 had previously been in foster care. The data is compelling that what my mentor Judge Edwards would say, that our experiment with how to handle these cases is failing. And then Pat O'Brien says, what is the cause of homelessness? Common wisdom says poverty, unemployment, addiction, mental illness. But he says the real reason is a lack of any functional human relationships. This information of these intersections are difficult to digest, but we all know that every day we see kids growing further and further apart from their families and their natural support systems. Relevant today to this principle of community and the common good is a piece of legislation that's making its way through Congress as we speak, which actually manifests the principle for government to maintain the family. This is the Family's First Act. Every child deserves a family, it says. We help children by supporting families, and we must see these cases through a new lens. When a child is in crisis, the family's in crisis. And when the family's in crisis, the parent's in crisis, and the child's in crisis. They are one. This act would fundamentally shift the federal funding to invest in strengthening families and protection of children. It says that it promotes a wider service array to achieve better outcomes for children and families. This act has some strong opposition, I have to be very honest, because it is a fundamental rechange. It is a flip of the discussion on where we spend our money. As you can see, it's landmark bipartisan bicameral legislation introduced in 2016. It's already made its way through the House and it's currently in the Senate. There are 400,000 children in foster care in any one day. 100,000 have spent at least 1 year in care, this is nationally, and 67,000 spend more than 3 years in care. More than 20,000 children reach adulthood while in foster care every year. Foster care entries nationally, 17% are for abuse, 83% are for neglect. And neglect and other reasons. That's parental substance abuse, child behavioral problems, parental death, parent incarceration, caretaker inability to cope, relinquishment, or inadequate housing. And this legislation calls out the funding imbalance. We spend $4.4 billion a year on the Title IV reimbursement, which is for out-of-care placement. And we spend $703 million per year for family preservation. We call this a funding imbalance. This legislation purports to invest in prevention services, and it would open up Title IV funding for prevention services, so it would flip the funding incentive completely so that children could be at home or with kin. It would also fund in a greater way and support pregnant and parenting kids in foster care. It would fund mental health, substance abuse treatment, and in-home parenting skills, and it would allow a family up to 12 months of Title IV funding in the home, so in a family maintenance type of arrangement. And as you see, the family can receive prevention services if the child continues to be at risk of entry into foster care, and there's no limit on how many times. And all services must be evidence-based and trauma-informed. And this legislation seeks to ensure the necessity of placing kids in congregate care. So it puts some pretty strict rules on how long a child can be in congregate or residential treatment. This is, it looks like this may be one of the key reasons that there's a lot of pushback because of our inability to think about how we can keep kids out of congregate care. It also gives $8 million in new grants for recruiting foster homes. And it will keep families together during substance abuse treatments in a residential treatment facility. That's a really big change. It also promotes timely access across state lines. We all know how long ICPC takes. It would call on us all to make that a quicker process. And by October 2026, which is a huge amount of time, 10 years, we're supposed to have everything on electronic ICPC exchanges. Instead of right now, they must be doing everything hand counting. Then we have principle number 8, and it says, governance structures at all levels. And I just wanted to say one more thing. I don't know if this legislation is going to pass, but it's really, really important that we're having these discussions at this level. Casey Family Foundation, who Annie Casey and Casey are very child-centered, very youth-focused. And this legislation also was passed by youth and created and informed by youth, has been trying to get the child welfare finance reform for the last decade. So again, I don't know if it's going to pass, but I love, love, love that we're having this discussion at such a high level. Governance structures in all levels and settings have an imperative to promote human dignity, to protect human rights, and build the common good, while the principle of subsidiarity calls for the functions of government to be performed at the lowest level possible in order to ensure self-determination and empowerment. Higher levels of government have the responsibility to provide leadership and to set policy in the best interest of the common good. And this goes with my theory that all change is local. That we can have these sweeping legislation, but what we really need is to look at our local governments. Numbers for comparison, I thought this was interesting. I come from a county of 1.8 million people, and we have 23 kids at our version of the YRTC and 73 kids in detention. Kids in foster care at out-of-home placement, we have 1,600. 200 of them are non-minor dependent youth, which is the voluntary 18 to 21. So we have 1,400 kids under the age of 18 in foster care. Nebraska has 1.9 million people statewide. You have 75 kids in the YRTC, and you have 157 in detention. You have 3,862 kids in foster out-of-home placement. And these numbers don't include the girls. I think you have a statewide girls facility. These numbers don't include the girls. So I just wanted to give you some comparison to show you that some of the things that we've been doing locally are really working. We believe that compassion creates opportunity for people. that we need to create a door for people to walk through with a new attitude, a new possibility, a new opportunity. And we have lots of discussions about what in juvenile courts, what is justice? Is it the same as in an adult criminal court? Is it the same as any other court? What is justice in juvenile courts? Success starts with opportunity. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a film to break up this 1-hour speech. And it's of our parents' attorneys in the child abuse and neglect cases, their firm.
The first day that I walked into dependency court, I've never experienced the feeling that I felt that day. I was confused, I was lost, I was frustrated, I was angry. There was, every range of emotion going through my body.
I just remember feeling very lost, very broken.
I was given a psych evaluation after my first 3 children were removed from my care. I remember DFCS reading it in court, and it stated that there was no amount of services that would rehabilitate me to become a parent because I never had a parent in my life.
And I had no answers. I had no clue what the next step was. All I knew is that I was told I had to be someplace, and it was at court if I wanted my kid.
Dependency Advocacy Center is a nonprofit legal services organization, and we provide court-appointed representation to parents and some children in the child welfare system in Santa Clara County. Historically, in the child welfare system nationally, the model is to have attorneys court-appointed to represent parents in the juvenile dependency system. We use a team of attorneys, social workers, and mentor parents to provide a holistic approach to the legal representation that we give our clients.
When my children were removed from me, I became very resentful and angry towards DFCS because of my childhood, and having a social worker from DFCS kind of made me rebel against them. When I first met my DAC social worker, it didn't feel like somebody was just supervising a visit. It felt like she was trying to find the connections and the bonds between me and Oliani so she could help us get unsupervised or overnights. I know she came 2 or 3 times, and I know by the second time I was just in love with her.
The clients that we serve are mostly indigent. Many of them have issues with drug or alcohol addiction, mental health, domestic violence histories. By having a social worker be part of the attorney's office, we're able to provide a different level of service. We're able to have somebody who works for the attorney who can speak to those clinical issues and also help the attorney better serve that client.
My wife and I had a long history of incarceration and drug use and abuse.
It was a lot of fighting at times. It was a lot of disagreeing.
The day that my children were removed, it was my youngest daughter's birthday.
My parents got arrested that day for doing drugs.
I remember being handcuffed in a chair in the front yard while my daughter was playing in the dirt at my feet, and I had no idea what was going to happen.
It was scary for me because when they said get down to the ground, I actually thought I was supposed to, and I thought that was like weird.
After we were arrested, my older children had to go to Oregon to live with their grandparents, while my youngest daughter ended up in protective custody.
For many of our clients, by the time they come into the courthouse, they have lost any social support that they had had. And at the point that they come into court, they've now lost their children. And that often means that they've lost their housing. And it almost always means that they've lost hope. So for these parents to come in and have a team, not just of an attorney, but also potentially a social worker and a mentor parent, someone who's been in their same shoes, to work with that parent and to advocate for them, I think it means everything.
My experience with my DAC attorney was like it was like an experience like I never had with any other attorney. She actually cared.
She explained everything to me thoroughly and gave me hope for the first time in a long time. Scared, but I had some hope and something I hadn't experienced in many, many years.
I'm fighting for my kids. I'm not trying to get in any trouble. you know, they could have looked at it any way. The courts, my social worker, my attorney could have looked at it any way, but just instantly, they're fighting for me. She was always on my side. I never once, and she was a mother. She was a mother, and she's never been in jail. She's never been in trouble. She's raising her son the best way she can, and she never once looked down on me because I was the addicted mom. You know? How do they do that? They gave me what I needed to start believing in myself, because I didn't deserve it. I knew my kids did, but I didn't.
I'm so proud of them. Like, there's no words to describe it, I guess. Because it's a lot of work to overcome something like that. And to lose everything and then to just come back up and start over and prosper doing it. It's a big accomplishment. I'm so proud.
I kind of had to rely on my siblings and my grandparents a lot growing up. So I'm just glad that I actually can have the experience of having real parents.
The Mentor Parent Program is an example of one of the programs that has really evolved over time to meet the needs of the community that we're serving. It's something that we're very proud of and that we believe gives our clients the best possible chance for success.
At the age 17, I was introduced to meth. It was crank then, and I loved it. My using affected my son, causing him to be removed from me. I remember he was very upset that he did not want to live with me, that he didn't want to be anywhere around me, and he didn't call me mom for a very, very long time. My experience with my mentor parent was awesome. She helped me realize that if I'm clean, I can accomplish anything. And before my mentor parent, I didn't have that. I have now been clean and sober for 3 years and 3 months and a couple weeks.
My hopes and my dreams are to stop the cycle in my family for DFCS. And hopefully my children don't follow the same path I did and make better choices.
To be a mentor now feels completely honorable. It's a pleasure. I am so blessed to be able to give back what was so freely given to me. To help people, mothers to be specific, feel the freedom that I felt when I decided to completely surrender, to completely admit powerlessness, and to learn what it means to actually focus on my recovery so I can focus on being a better parent. I can't wait sometimes to get to work. It's pretty awesome.
I now am a mentor parent for DAC. I help fathers struggling with drug and alcohol addiction and that have lost their children. I get to give back what was given to me.
It's just wonderful to have that feeling that I have people to depend on for my future.
We all published this book together. We after we started our family wellness court, and we discovered that it really worked. We had a grant, and it was a 5-year evaluation. Before family wellness court, I would see the 6th, 7th, 8th meth baby in a row. And family wellness court, where they had to come in if they had a positive tox baby, we grew that from the ground up. And in 5 years, we only had 1 positive tox baby. So it works. So it's all documented, the Santa Clara County experience, if you want to read about it. In my court and justice system partners, we collaboratively work to alleviate the oppressive practices that government systems have so easily historically imposed upon our families in the following ways. What's my time? Okay. So you saw the Family Wellness Court video, the Parent Mentor Program. We opened up sober living houses for fathers and children. We have a dual diagnosis court for our juvenile youth who have both substance abuse and mental health disorders. We treat them with a human services lens in our juvenile justice court, meaning the juvenile delinquency court. We have MDTs and RAP teams for our juvenile justice youth. We also make referrals to places like SSI and our San Andreas regional centers. Every time I do a psych eval on one of my juvenile justice youth, it's very common that they have an IQ around 70 to 80, which, as you know, 100 is the average IQ, between 100 and 110. I had a kid the other day with a 46. How do I expect that child to rehabilitate? I need to know what I'm working with, so I feel very strongly about looking at even the juvenile justice kids with a therapeutic lens. We've developed educational champions for each of our juvenile justice youth to do whatever it takes to get that child back into the correct school setting. We all know that the data says that child failure from school leads to juvenile delinquent behavior. So let's get them back to school. We have scripts for parents and grandparents so that they can advocate for their children at the school level. We've developed partners with school districts. We've also taken the awesome CASA program in the child abuse and neglect arena and developed a CAFA program, a child, CAFA standing for Court-Appointed Friend and Advocate for the Juvenile Justice Youth. So we took the CASA model and we call it CAFA in Juvenile Delinquency Court, Juvenile Justice Court. Last year we focused on our African American males. They had been previously 70% failure for our diversion. Last year, 25 out of 25 made it through the informal diversion, felony diversion, because they had a CAFA. So that, it really works. Principle number 4, well, let me tell you a few more. Transportation initiatives. The governor in our state has decriminalized fare evasion because a lot of our kids are just riding the public transportation for free. We're working with VTA right now to let all kids with an ID get on for free and ride for free. San Francisco has already done that. We also have a very robust victim offender mediation program where victims and offenders can meet and talk about everything, including restitution. All misdemeanors are referred for informal handling by the prosecutor, so we do not have misdemeanor prosecution in our juvenile justice court. We don't do status offender charges or criminalization of status offenses. We only do felony prosecution. 70% of our girls are diverted from our juvenile justice system by doing informal handling. Just wanted to mention that. We have mentor youth, just like the mentor parents. We have hired youth to do group mentoring for our youth. We also have joint response, so police go out with the social worker makes the call in the field, the social worker transports the child if the child has to be transported. We went from 150 kids a day in our children's shelter to closing the children's shelter. We don't have a children's shelter anymore. Our daily population in our juvenile justice arena used to be 300. It is now, as you saw, our daily detention rates are more like 70. We changed the signage in our courthouse to make it user-friendly. We put flow charts of the actual system from detention to parental rights terminated so that people can see what's happening to their cases. We do that in several languages. We have been trained and regularly trained on trauma-informed systems approaches. We train about every 3 to 4 months, our entire stakeholder group. With regard to the intersection between child welfare and juvenile justice, we view these kids as the same, coming from the same families, coming into a different courthouse door. So we have MDTs, a dually involved youth unit with social workers and probation officers. So youth can be both child abuse and neglect court jurisdiction and probation jurisdiction. They have both a probation officer and a social worker. We take our government role very seriously. I do not wish to be part of the problem. I wish to be part of the solution. So I refused to be just another point along the way on the school to prison pipeline. I say, not on my watch. I will not be party to a system of dysfunction, status quo, and apathy that hurts everybody in front of me when I took an oath to serve them. I have an opportunity court that I hold in the community. A nonprofit has built a courtroom for me in the community where I have my juvenile justice youth come, and they have a court date, but they also have jobs, GED, high school diploma access, college access, reproductive health information. We have raffles, incentives. We make sure everybody has health insurance, and we celebrate. That's where we have our graduations. I do have a video, but I don't have time. But if you want to go on YouTube, you can see it. If you Google Youth Opportunity Court Lucero, it'll come right up. I have young women, young men graduating, saying for the first time they've accomplished something. Our goal is to connect them to services in the community for behavioral health and substance abuse treatment and get them off probation. The good news is that children and youth are resilient. A child is resilient when they feel safe, lovable, and capable. And we saw that with our speaker at noon yesterday, and we saw it with a young lady who got the award. They both talked of resilience. That is the good news. Principle number 4 is principle number 7 talks about solidarity, that we are, oh, that's wrong. Okay, well, I've completely lost my... Did I already do this one? Nope. Okay, well, I'm totally lost. Wait. Okay, principle number 7. Okay, a basic moral test of any community or society is the way in which our most vulnerable members are faring. In a society characterized by deepening divisions between rich and poor, the needs of those most at risk should be considered a priority. I wanted to show you this map. This is the map of fines and fees that are imposed for those in the juvenile courts. Families must pay multiple costs. We recently have a moratorium in my county where the parents no longer have to pay for incarceration fees for their kids, electronic monitoring fees or GPS fees. They don't have to pay for their public defender. These costs they're on hold. Nobody pays for those now. We found when we crunched the numbers that we spent more as a county collecting than we did on getting the money. So we were the 3rd county in California to eliminate these fees. Access to justice, as I had said, is different in juvenile court. It looks like access to mental health treatment, medical insurance, immigration, addressing immigration issues, housing, substance abuse disorders, treatment, clothing, education, jobs. Our Board of Supervisors has actually been really active with us. Here we have the Board of Supervisors setting a policy that we're not to detain minors under the age of 13. So we do everything we can to keep under 13 out of our detention facilities, and we've done that by having agreements with community-based locations where the police or social workers can take our kids instead of to detention, because we do believe in that brain science about impulse control and develop how damaging it is to put a child that young into incarceration. Every single piece of policy, board policy in our county has a child impact statement. So if there is a policy that's being promoted, there's an analysis of how it affects the children in Santa Clara County. We have a no citation policy in one of our school districts. The school resource officers have agreed not to cite. So when in 2015, the crime rate in that zip code went down 40%. We had school-based services instead. So no kids came into custody, everybody was referred to school-based services. Our police chief wants to take this countywide. So it's working. We also have done the DA is doing a truancy amnesty fees. A lot of our kids were accumulating lots of fees for truancy. It was even preventing them from getting their driver's license. And our DA is requesting to dismiss all of those outstanding tickets and fees and fines We think it's about for 20,000 people. So this goes along with that principle about making sure we're not putting more on the backs of the most poor. I also really believe in therapeutic justice, that this court is a problem-solving court. Therapeutic justice is a well-known way to handle families and children that came from the criminal drug court folks. So I really believe in us handling it that way. There's so much that we can do that doesn't cost money also, like petition language that's not shaming or blaming to the parent. Give each person a clean slate, the ability to start again, to have a new beginning. Be generous of spirit, just listen. Connecting people to their families, family find. Visitation, maybe parents can go to doctor's appointments or school events. I have done enhanced visitation at our detention facilities for not just the parents, but also for the siblings. Make sure your court setting is safe, that there are no side conversations. Make sure that we focus on the person in front of us. Look the client in the eye. These are things that are very trauma-informed systems changes and don't cost anything. Starting your own cross-agency systems teams that require those at the decision-making level to meet regularly and problem solve is also very critical. We meet with medical, transit, housing, behavioral health, financial, drug and alcohol, probation, law enforcement. We make sure that we're not drug testing somebody 5 times in a week. We actually share the drug test. That we found that was costing our agencies like $400,000 a year each. And when we started to share the drug test with the consents, that was much more humane and cost effective. Rest assured, I want you to know that success attracts success. No one wants to be part of an oppressive court-based hierarchy that is seen as punitive and unforgiving. I temper accountability with mercy, whatever level I am, whatever level those around me are. A compassionate approach will be rewarded with others who see and want to help. It feels good to see people treating other people with kindness. I'm often approached and asked about what I need for the kids: computers, gift cards, clothing, shoes, food, backpacks, private school tuition, money for emergency funds for the parents, trip for the kids. I'm totally serious. People come to me seriously and ask if they can help. How many ways can a system show people that we care deeply for them? My mother tells me the story of finding the miracle of the 12 steps on a bulletin board at a laundromat across from our Section 8 apartment complex in Davis, California, when she was 20 years old and I was 2. She told me that she was experiencing maternal depression and had thought of ending her life that day. In the laundromat, when she discovered the phone number, she phoned and was directed to her first Al-Anon meeting by a gentle woman on the other end. The ladies that she met, Fran C., Mary W., Marion C., and Mary C., befriended her immediately and told her what to do. This natural community support told her to kick my dad out when he came home drunk and to call the police if he refused to leave. She did. I saw my dad arrested and we were left with my mom. These ladies gave my mom support, loved us like their own children, and we muddled through. My father started going to meetings, likely under the pressure of the husbands of Fran and Mary, Hugh and John. My father started trying to get sober when he was 22 years old. After my parents found the 12 steps, our life wasn't perfect, but as a child, I remember the love in the rooms, and I saw my parents reaching out to the community to try to heal our broken family. My dad would get years of sobriety together, think he was cured, and then he would drink again. Addiction is a disease of the mind, body, and spirit. And it tells a person that they don't have a disease, and it lays in wait until the ego can trick them into using again if they're not vigilant. Each time my father drank, he would get arrested. I am sure that it didn't help that we were probably only one of 2 Mexican families living in our community at the time. He drove a low rider and he wore a fake black leather jacket and he smoked cigarettes. I'm pretty sure he was a cop magnet. I actually happen to think that in hindsight, we were lucky for that because he never really got into serious trouble, just trouble. Over the years, my parents stayed together. We were able to move into our own home and my father had a stable job in spite of his intermittent periods of sobriety and active alcoholism. When I was 15, my father took his last drink. He was pulled over on the way home for a taillight out. He had been drinking, so he was arrested because he was in violation of his probation. My father's AA sponsor bailed him out and told my father that he'd really screwed up this time and asked my dad if he was done. That night, I recall my father coming into the living room in our newly purchased home, all the kids lined up on the sofa, 16, 15, 9, and 8 years old. For the first time in our lives, my father told us that he had made a horrible mistake by choosing to drink again. And he promised us, with my mother by his side, that he would never drink again. He also broke the news that he may lose his job, which required him to drive, because he would lose his license, and that we might lose our home because he might lose his job. I'm not sure if I was so emotional because my father was telling us we might lose our house, or if it was because for the first time my father admitted his mistakes, and this giant Herculean semi-pro football player, my beautiful father, was crying. He didn't lose his job because his boss gave him a desk job for a year while his license was suspended. And he rode his bike to work. My father's boss loved him. He knew what I knew. When my father did not drink, he was kind, smart, and funny. My father's boss took a chance. My father did not squander this opportunity. Something in him had changed. After 13 years in and out of jail and in and out of our lives, something finally shifted. We didn't lose our house. We didn't lose our family. My father never drank again. My father died in 1993 with 18 years of continuous sobriety at the age of 51 from stomach cancer. I saw him rise from town drunk to town counselor, role model, and beloved citizen. One of our Section 8 housing social workers early on had encouraged my father to go back to school and earn a bachelor's degree. He did. He did even when he was struggling with alcoholism. He got his degree. He then rose up in that company that allowed him to keep his job, traveling internationally to check on the tomato farmers in Mexico. He had transformed in body, mind, and spirit. My father had healed. I saw my mother do whatever it took to keep her children safe and her family together. We did family counseling, attended Alateen, AA speaker meetings, and participated in AA extracurricular activities as often as time would allow. She used the natural support systems in our community. They helped us with furniture when we moved, made meals for us when we were sick, when my mom was sick, and drove my dad to meetings when he couldn't drive. After my father died, my mother completed her high school diploma, obtained a bachelor's degree at UC Davis in women's studies. She joined the Peace Corps at the age of 60 and lived in South America for 2 years as a community advocate, specializing in domestic violence and addiction. She later returned and obtained her master's degree in the spring of 2009 as a Title IV social worker at San Jose State. She now works with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. As a bilingual therapist, she has 8 grandchildren, all are well, 3 college graduates, 1 granddaughter currently applying to law school, 1 U.S. Marine, 1 in college at USC, the rest still at school aged. My sisters and I are best friends. We speak almost daily. If I had been separated from my family as a child, the chances are high that I would have lost my sisters and brother. The chances are that I would not know the possibility that a family can heal. I would never have seen my father put aside his pride and admit complete defeat. The chances are I would not have been able to overcome the extreme grief and sadness that I would have felt from being taken even from that very dysfunctional home. Chances are I would be a very different person today, never having seen firsthand the full arc of human suffering and of human resiliency and healing. I have seen so much in my own family that tells me that people can change, mothers can be protective, children can be resilient, and communities can act as natural support systems, that they do not leave children in harm's way or women in vulnerable to domestic violence positions. People can move out of poverty and become homeowners, taxpayers, leaders of government change, breaking cycles of poverty and addiction. 80% of our cases are neglect. I think that that's important to remember. And there is an MIT study, which I can't find right now, that says when a child is between the ages of 5 and 15, they fare better if they are left, if it's a call that can be made in the field. And I think that I've seen plenty of proof of that. We have to use our imagination. when we're trying to figure out how to get resources to families, how to heal families. We're really only limited by our own thinking. Father G says, sometimes resilience arrives in the moment you discover your own unshakable goodness. I just want to thank you for letting me share my family history with you and all the good work that's being done in Santa Clara County. You guys do really great work. You are on the front lines with humans, bearing witness to suffering every day. I know it's hard, but being a person who operates in the world with a compassionate attitude for me gives me strength. I have to say, so does my yoga, so do my vitamins. But I wouldn't change anything about my life or about my work. Thank you again for having me, and go forth, hopefully rejuvenated, and keep doing your good work. Thank you so much.